NCHV, National Coalition of Homeless Veterans, is now with us. And we are going to be talking to the panelists, our core partner, VC, NCHV, Catherine Monet, is the Chief Executive Officer of the National Coalition of Homeless Veterans. And also Ralph Cooper is the Community and Residential Veterans Services Coordinator, Cloudbreak Houston, LLC. We are here now going to have a discussion about Housing First, which is a program that is established for homeless veterans. Hello, Catherine and Ralph. Welcome to the show.
Having us.
Yes, Ralph, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Yes, and happy Father's Day before we start.
I appreciate that, and the same to you, sir.
Okay. Yeah, tell us a little about this. Tell me more about this Housing First.
Well, Housing First was a method that they came up with to allow homeless veterans to come right from the street, right into housing without having to be sober and clean. And the theory was to have services available once they move in. In the case for the VASH program, it was the Veterans Administration. Actually, Housing First was not just for veterans, but for any homeless person. But the one that we were concerned with and the one we were affected by was the ones where the VA was the case management group. They had clinical social workers attached to the property and would provide counseling and case management to the veteran on site. So the person could actually imbibe in their unit, or they wouldn't, if they were on drugs or alcohol or whatnot, they didn't have to come in clean and sober like the previous process was.
Yeah, that is so critical. Yes, because being sober and clean is only that issue is only just a symptom of the real problem, right? So it actually gave.
My theory. I mean, I understood it, and it worked. If you had people, well, they call them navigators, meeting these individuals 2 or 3 times a week, they had to, because they had to relearn living skills after being on the street for 2, 3, or 4 years, surviving in the homeless community is a lot different than surviving in an apartment where you have to cook your food, go grocery shopping, keep it clean, pay your rent on time. So you can see that that's a big challenge.
Yes. Yeah, and Catherine, you're on the line as well. What is your view of this Housing First?
Well, I've generally tended to support Housing First just because a lot of the research indicates that outcomes improve in terms of, reducing the amount of time when people are homeless, in terms of, improving their access or their adherence to the services and treatment modalities versus, the other model. And then also looking just at, giving people the dignity that they need, right, to understand that their concerns are being heard, their needs are being met, and that they can actually remain in housing without having to do a bunch of different things in order to keep their housing.
Oh, excellent. Yeah. So maybe you can describe a little bit about how far-reaching is this program? Where is it located? What states? How is it organized?
So Housing First is really a type of intervention. It's not a program per se, right? So the government has pretty much shifted its response to homelessness to a housing first orientation, which means that instead of running people through emergency shelter to service intensive transitional housing to then being able to access housing, they're starting with the housing and then building the services on top of that platform, right? So it's sort of like, I liken it to the shift in healthcare where you went from, heavy use of inpatient intensive care to a more outpatient basis. So, I mean, HUD is doing it, VA is doing it. You sort of see it in two different spectrums where you've got permanent supportive housing, which is much like the programs that Mr. Cooper works on every day, where you've got folks with higher intensity needs and, a lot more case management support. But then you've also got less intensive programs like rapid rehousing where you're, working with someone who maybe lost their job and doesn't have enough savings to pay their security deposit for their next lease or, something like that. So it comes in a variety of shades.
So how do the veterans access this program if they're homeless? Is there an intervention team that goes out to meet them where they are, or do they apply for it, or how does that work?
Well, in Houston, Texas, they have a process where where they have to go and meet with the Department of Veterans Affairs in an intake process and apply for a voucher, which is called a VASH voucher. This enables them to have housing at something similar to Section 8, at a third of their income. Now, in order for them to take advantage of housing first, they had to apply for the voucher through the program and come and choose where they want to live. Mm-hmm. Now, for me, I've been involved with housing and homelessness for many, many years. I'm 30-something years. Oh. And I just know that if you're talking to somebody who's not sober and clean and you're trying to talk with them and get rational discussion going, it's very difficult if they're inebriated or spaced out. So for me, I prefer where you enter into a program like they have that the VA actually, grant per diem, they already have an existing program that reaches out, brings in the homeless, introduces them to learning how to prepare for work and living skills so that they can manage an apartment once they move into it. And they know certain kinds of things so that they can be successful. One of the problems with Housing First is, they come in, and all of these things are great in a small unit, but we have over 200 units that are veterans that are on housing, on VASH housing. So you only have 6 or 7 case workers, and there's no way for them to become successful because they aren't learning the skills needed to remain. Okay. That's my opinion.
Oh yes, sir. Yeah. And does this program intersect with anything else like HUD or any other housing projects, or how does it get funded, and is there a problem with the funding?
So I'll speak to that a little bit if you don't mind, Mr. Cooper.
I definitely don't mind.
Wonderful. So it is an interagency program. So generally HUD provides the vouchers, VA provides the case management, and in some instances there is some additional HUD funding tied to development of the affordable housing when you've got a project-based situation like, the project where Mr. Cooper works. Now, there have been issues with VA's funding where the case manager funding wasn't always released at the same time as the voucher funding, and so some of that led to some staffing shortages that I think largely contribute to some of the challenges that veterans in the program have seen.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I see. Yeah, so this is something that is a benefit for veterans that we should be, sort of pressing for and talking to our legislators to make sure with the adequate funding is there for those people who are proudly served. And one of the other things is, does someone have to be honorably discharged to be part of this program? What if they're dishonorably discharged? Is there a pathway for them to get into the program?
Well, if they're dishonorably discharged, no. If they have bad paper, which is considered unadaptable, undesirable, or a bad conduct discharge, then they're not VA medical eligible.
Okay.
But if they have general honorable conditions or general discharge, yes, they can utilize the services.
Yes. Okay. Excellent. Yeah, that's good to know. And is there any place that people can call, or is there a website or something they can go to find out more about the program?
Kathy, you got that one?
So I would say that they should probably go. I think your best source is not necessarily a website, but your local VA medical center to, call and ask for the HUD-VASH program staff. I just want to mention one more thing on the last question, though, and it's that there is some legislation in Congress working to expand eligibility to HUD-VASH. It's H.R. 2398, and it did pass the House, but it has not moved forward very far in the Senate.
Yeah, okay.
What does it do?
So it would expand eligibility of the HUD-VASH program to veterans with general and other than honorable discharges.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Allow for more veterans to participate in the program.
So that's an important piece of
That's a
legislation.
good thing.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because, sometimes I wonder about the dishonorable discharges. Many of the veterans actually, especially when they're doing multiple tours, if they come back and they have some PTSD and something happens during their service time, they can be dishonorably discharged based on something that wasn't treated or, paid attention to. And so...
Now, let me clarify that.
Yes.
Dishonorable discharge, you just about murdered somebody.
Oh, okay.
I mean, that's the most serious charge. You lose all your rights except to be buried. Not dishonorable, but other than honorable means that there are gradations of that. But dishonorable, that's serious.
That's really that's a big thing.
Right.
Well, in some communities, the continuums of care, so the HUD-funded grantees tend to prioritize those veterans for services if they're working actively to achieve the federal benchmarks and criteria to end homelessness.
But
because
not
one of the
dishonorable, Catherine.
Well,
dishonorable is the only one. Now, on grant per diem, on all the others, dishonorable is the one that you're not going to be able to utilize. But the other than honorable
for that, though.
Yeah.
Like they're using the HUD dollars and prioritizing those veterans and moving them to the front of the line so that they can, hit their targets for benchmarks and criteria for ending veteran homelessness. And there are some who've seen really great success in doing that.
So what types of services, because you were mentioning before that they don't have to be sober and clean, in order to take advantage of this. So what kinds of mental health services are in support of this structuring? Because it sounds like you're buying the house, you're getting into the home first, and then they build the services around it from what you were saying. So how does that work? And, who are the partners who come in? Is it mostly the VA services, or do they have community-based organizations or other services, healthcare providers involved in that network?
Yeah, well, we're very fortunate that we have U.S. Vets, which is a national nonprofit organization, to augment some of the services that the VA provides. The VA provides clinical social work, so they have access to VA healthcare, VA services. I mean, of course, this this COVID-19 has really turned all of that stuff upside down, and has really created a challenge that's very severe. And so there are other organizations. I think Catherine mentioned community continuing care. It's a community organization that helps work any homeless, including veterans, through the process.
Mm-hmm.
And can you kind of elaborate on that? I probably said the wrong name, Catherine.
Well, so it's continuums of care. I mean, generally when we're looking at the HUD-VASH program, it's largely VA case managers, and they are understaffed and very hardworking and absolutely doing the Lord's work. But in some communities, we hear feedback that they're overly focused on some of the clinical aspects of case management and aren't as focused on some of the housing stability aspects, like how is a veteran getting around? Are they able to get their groceries? Are they, actually sleeping in their bed, or are they still sleeping on the floor weeks later because that's where they're comfortable? And so it is mostly VA, but in some communities you've got, key partners like U.S. Vets or, nonprofit or even for-profit entities that come in to help with budgeting and financial management and other aspects. So I think it largely depends on how much support, permanent supportive housing providers and, transitional housing providers can wrap around the veteran in those situations. But there are, some veterans that are just off living in a house that belongs to a small landlord, and pretty much all they've got access to is their VA case manager.
Oh, boy.
So it's a pretty wide variety.
And you mentioned, challenges during the COVID. Are they, getting more involved with mental health? We're hearing a lot about telemedicine and those kinds of things. Any, any insights into that, or how that's working, or if that's something that actually helps in this situation?
Well, at the Houston site, we have case managers that are housed actually there. So even if they can't see them face to face, they do telephone conferencing with them. And then if someone comes up symptom, they can call a number where they can go and arrange to get tested. And if they are found to be have the virus, if it's not sending them to the hospital, then they can quarantine, and we have quarantine units available for 14 days, and then they get retested. So that's in addition to all of the other kinds of issues, because unemployment is really off the charts. Then people who would normally be trying to work can't. So
Right.
you can imagine that it's really problematic. We've got to really work hard to keep food and stuff available, and of course the maintenance crew is phenomenal.
Yes.
At the site and do a great job. But it's just an added burden that we've never seen before, anything like this.
Yes, yes. And it sounds like there's a potential also with COVID-19 for many veterans to be displaced from when they were on the margins of being able to support everything, and they may become homeless during this time period. As we've seen other people, we see long food lines around the country, and I can only imagine that veterans are taking a particularly hard hit from that. And so what do you envision the big problem is nationally, as far as how many veterans are in this situation, how much services of the service needs are out there, and are we really chipping away at the iceberg, or is there something that we need to know about as far as the scale of this problem?
So some
No.
economists have. Oh, well, go ahead, Mr. Cooper. And
No, go ahead. Ladies first.
oh, well, thank you. I was going to say some economists are predicting that if unemployment leads to homelessness in the same way as it did after the Great Depression, we're going to see about a 40 to 45% increase in homelessness when the point in time numbers for, the 2020 count come out in the fall. And so I think there is a big worry that if we don't see a second wave and, attention goes elsewhere, we're going to be seeing a dramatic increase in veteran homelessness, and civilian homelessness, but there's not going to be that much political will there to invest in the solutions that we'll need to keep people either in their homes or rapidly rehouse them or provide them with employment assistance or, whatever other issues they might need assistance with.
Oh, that's a dramatic increase. Oh, okay.
Yeah, it really is. It took us, 10 years to decrease the numbers by 50%? And, the numbers aren't perfect,
Right.
but, it's basically setting the clock back
Yes.
by 10 years.
Also, that during this COVID, there has been a moratorium on evictions. And so I just saw recently that they're going to probably reopen the eviction process. So we've had people who've gotten behind in their rent because they didn't evict them, but they still have to pay their rent.
Their rent.
And
yes.
we have had some help through the CARES program, and where it helps them with their back rent and try to bring them up to date. But this is still going to be a real devastation once the courts open up and they start the eviction process. There's going to be a lot of people on the street.
Yes. Yeah, and that's really frightening to have our veterans even face more because of this. And we need to have a national response from our legislators and people who are supporting our veterans. And what do you think the general public needs to know? And we're going to start moving towards closing out this segment. But I want you to talk to what does the public need to do to get involved? What do we as veterans need to get involved? We have VFW and American Legion, and we have different posts around the country. What should we be doing as a society to help this issue?
Catherine, talk to them about what we talked about getting together with the various organizations.
So I will. I think I've got three big things. And the first is that, we've been advocating for sufficient funding for VA's homeless programs, and some of that is carried in the HEROES Act, which is sitting in the Senate. I would love if folks could advocate for, that, or at least the veterans provisions within that to move forward.
Okay.
The second thing is that, the federal agency looking at just the national response to homelessness is redoing their federal strategic plan. I think there's an ability for the public to comment if you go to www.usich.gov/public-input.
Oh, get that one more
folks
time.
It's www.usich.gov/public-input, and you can comment on, what you think the government should be doing until July 11th. But the third big thing is that, when you look at the population of veterans that are homeless, right, it's about 33% of the veterans counted are African American versus, the representation in the general veteran population at only about 12%. And so there is this overrepresentation of African Americans in the population. And so I think we need to start looking a little bit bigger picture at, equity, not only within the VA homeless programs, but also within some of the, other parts of the community and other sectors that really feed people into the homeless system. So, for example, what are we doing with regard to reentry of veterans when they're leaving jails or prisons? Are they accessing disability compensation at the same rate? How are they treated when, they foreclose on their VA guaranteed home loan? Like all of these different factors.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're starting to
Okay.
kind of expand out our work and look at more of that.
Okay,
So,
we're running out of time, but
I'm sorry.
I just want to thank both of you